Good morning, everyone. Steel tariffs have been all over the news lately. They did it. They got rid of the steel tariffs. Kind of. Kind of. And lots more today with Catherine Mckenna, who got a little drunk in Newfoundland. And I found the video that I think they deleted. And I'll show you why I think that. But first, CBC News is reporting, quote, "Steel yourself, Canada. Tariff deals fall short of a full lift." Don't bask in the glory of this one. United Steelworkers President Leo Gerald told CBC's The House podcast this week, casting a skeptical eye on the agreement to end steel and aluminum tariffs. The deal points to where the Trump administration's protectionism may be headed next, and it's not really a return to North American free trade zone for steel and aluminum products. That didn't stop Prime Minister Justin Trudeau and Foreign Affairs Minister Chrystia Freeland from touring Canada, striking celebrity poses with the grateful hard hats and overalls crowd last week. Trudeau talked to aluminum workers in Sept Isles, Quebec. Sorry, I forgot that wrong. And steelworkers in Sault Ste. Marie, Ontario. Freeland met steelworkers in Regina before heading to meet more aluminum workers in Jonquière. Sorry, I forgot that wrong, Quebec. Their messages at every stop: "We had your backs." Patience and firm persistence paid off. Sault Ste. Marie MP Terry Sheenan even introduced Trudeau as their man of steel. Canada is about to make sure that we're taking care of our people. Able to make sure we're taking care of our people, the Prime Minister said, sporting an Algoma steel jacket. But he acknowledged there's still more work to do. If everyone at those events was being completely honest, they'd admit things aren't returning to how they used to be. Workers must steel themselves for this. The U.S. hasn't abandoned protectionism. Rather, it adjusted when it became politically expedient to do so. The White House needed allies in its escalating trade fight with China. This tariff deal cleared the way for a much-needed trade win on the relatively simpler North American front. But a full lift of the tariffs didn't really come without concessions, despite what Trudeau suggested on May 17th. Quote, "There wasn't a way to do this without some sort of concession to the United States," said former U.S. diplomat Sarah Goldfeder as the deal was announced. "This is a necessary evil." Deal with our biggest trading partner? Weird. Back to the article. Here are a few still unanswered questions about where things stand now. What's a meaningful surge? The agreement is what trade watchers call a snapback deal. Yes, the tariffs were removed, but the U.S. reserves the right to slap them back on, specifically, quote, "in the event that imports of aluminum or steel products surge meaningfully beyond historic volumes of trade over a period of time." Freeland has been asked to define a surge and couldn't. There's a conversation still underway with the U.S. to flesh out how this language should be interpreted. Deal's done, everybody, but, there's some details still. Like how long we make the payments and how much the payments are for. Sounds like a negotiation still. Anyway, back to the article. Canada's hope... flesh out how this language should be interpreted. Canada's hope was that this part of the agreement would never be used. Please don't use that part of the agreement that we left in. Please don't ever use it. Why would you... Number one, why would you agree to an agreement that's non-binding? Number two, why would you agree to an agreement that has terms in it that you hope they never use? Please don't use those terms. I mean, yeah, we can agree that you can have those terms, but don't ever use those terms. Weird, right? Weird. Anyway, back to the article. Catherine Cobden of the Canadian Steel Producers Association told CBC News this week that she doesn't have a clear definition of surge either, but she's hoping for a way to engage with the Americans and nail it down. Otherwise, what's to stop the Americans from torquing any increase in Canadian imports into an industry-threatening surge? What time periods would be compared? How would these volumes be calculated? Sometimes, CBC News, data can be manipulated to show whatever you want the numbers to show. And if tariffs are reapplied, Canada could no longer retaliate with tariffs on politically sensitive commodities like orange juice or bourbon. But CBC News really should pay attention to that first line there. That sometimes data can be manipulated to show whatever you want the numbers to show. Yeah. Are there really no quotas? Both the Mexican and Canadians said that they wouldn't settle for a deal that fixed quotas on their exports. But as Carleton University's Meredith Lilly observed on Power and Politics last week, quote, "There's language in this agreement that suggests perhaps we have a quota by another name." The agreement lays out how the U.S., quote, "may request consultations before imposing duties at the same rate as the previous tariffs, with consideration of market share." In other words, Americans don't want Canada's market share to grow. Is this a quota in disguise? The U.S.-Mexico agreement is less subtle, saying that in assessing whether there has been a surge, Washington will consider the U.S. may require 225,000 tons of billet from Mexico, and new investment in Mexico may require 200,000 tons of cold-rolled steel. Those are negotiated quotas hiding in plain sight. The new but undefined officials are working on it, Freeland's spokesman said. Monitored regime for Canada and Mexico imports, quote, may treat products made with steel that is melted and poured in North America separately from products that are not. Freeland often emphasizes the wording here is may, not will. Only a handful of facilities in Hamilton and Sault Ste. Marie, Ontario make steel from iron ore in integrated mills. Most of Canada's products are smaller factories for electrical arc steelmaking, often from scrap. Where does the scrap come from? Even if it's not from offshore, industry representatives say that that's rarely profitable. Can they prove the integrity of their supply chains? If they lack the right paperwork, Canadian steel products could be stalled or even rejected at the U.S. border as Eagle Eye track any trace of Chinese steel. It creates uncertainty for exporters, a classic non-tariff barrier to trade. Right. And there's more in this as well. I'm just doing the important bits. And well, there's one more important bit, so I'll end it here. But it's risky to draft and pass an implementation bill to change Canadian law based on an agreement that's still fluid in Washington. What if they make Canadian drugs more expensive than they actually needed to be to get a deal? How would that play in an election campaign? No mention of NAFTA legislation appears on the House of Commons notice paper in time for a bill to be introduced on Monday when the House returns for what is scheduled to be its final 2 to 4 week stretch before the summer. Right? So interesting stuff. Steel and aluminum create a lot of jobs. They're good paying jobs, and the tariffs that got slapped on last year with the renegotiation, or not tariffs, the Trump stopping the steel coming over, all of that was very, very bad for jobs, and it played very poorly to a lot of Trudeau's base. So this is good timing, except that it's not everything Trudeau promised. Interesting, right? Here's the Catherine McKenna story. So here's my homeland, onlyoneNation.ca or .ca on Twitter's tweeting, quote, at Catherine McKenna, stated in Newfoundland, while under the influence of alcohol, if you say it on the floor of the House of Commons and repeat it enough, people will eventually believe you. Actually, she said people will totally believe you. Fear-mongering and false propaganda to all Canadians, repeating it again. And here's a link to the video that she posted. And wouldn't you know it, darn shucks, doesn't exist. And actually, I was surprised that it didn't exist. I have it on my list, like my show list, right? And I clicked it this morning because I was going to do it last night and I just didn't run out of time. And it was gone. And I was like, oh my goodness, no. But I had another one. And somebody backed it up. Here we go. I know. So 12 seconds of Catherine McKenna laying out the Liberals' plan for the last 4 years. This is all they've done. They haven't done anything of substance. This is all they've done. Take it away, Ms. McKenna.
I actually gave them some real advice. I said that if you actually say it louder, we've learned in the House of Commons, if you repeat it, if you say it louder, if that is your talking point, people will totally believe it. So just go it.
People will totally believe it. Yes, totally believe it, won't they? From coast to coast to coast, communities are already feeling the impacts of climate change, and our national parks are not immune. Last year, several bridges in Gross Morin were almost washed away after an intense storm. If we want to protect our parks and country, it's time to act. And the only way to save or to stop rainstorms is to throw tax dollars at them. Right? Thank you, Stephen Taylor, for backing this up. I might just record this and put it on YouTube by itself because this is very instructional, right? Right, Ms. McKenna? This is the way to push your agenda through. Get your talking point and don't move on it. Just repeat it until people totally believe you. Wow. Okay, CBC News, and this is some good news for my final piece of reporting this morning. And it's CBC News reporting, quote, Facebook's Zuckerberg Sandberg could be found in contempt of Parliament, MPs warn. That's not the good news. We'll get to the good news at the bottom. Canadian MPs are warning that Facebook's top officials could be found in contempt of Parliament if they continue to ignore a subpoena to testify in Ottawa this week. Are those the consequences that Trudeau was promising last week? Eh? No? Okay. Starting today, the House of Commons Privacy and Ethics Committee will be joined by elected officials from around the world to discuss data collection, privacy online, and democracy. The committee had extended invites to some of the most well-known tech players, including Facebook, Twitter, and Google. The mix of MPs, senators, and government officials from around the world are to join Canada's Privacy and Ethics Committee as they hear from witnesses. Earlier this month, the committee voted to subpoena Facebook's founder, Mark Zuckerberg, and Chief Operating Officer, Sheryl Sandberg, to appear as witnesses. If they continue to ignore the summons, Conservative MP Bob Zimmer said the Ethics Committee has talked about finding them in contempt of Parliament. I don't think that it would send a good message internationally about, blowing off an entire country of 36 million people, said Zimmer, the chair of the Commons Committee. The bottom line is that they show up and answer our questions, so my hope is that that still happens. I just wanted to show you how the 36 36.9 million population of Canada. I thought it was closer to 37, but whatever. 36 million, we can go with that. Compares to some of Facebook's large groups. Imagine a congress of people, a group of people got together to rally Facebook, and they got to, they have a lot of people, right? You hope that they're not ignored. Let's see how big Facebook groups actually are. Here's, Facebook's biggest group. Facebook for every phone has 498.22 million people. This population of Canada is 36 million. Facebook biggest group is biggest Facebook fans, 186.43 million. These people are enjoying Facebook. Cristiano Ronaldo, and I am not a football fan, so sorry about the slaughtering of his name, but he's got a lot of fans, and 120 million. That's, more than 2 times the population of Canada. Can you imagine if they all wanted Facebook to do something and got, a bunch of people to say, come and talk to us? Shakira fans, 104 million people. Vin Diesel fans, 101 million people. Barcelona, Football Club Barcelona, 96. I mean, a lot of people like football, right? It's incredible. So, right? I don't know about this one. So it's interesting how big Canada thinks we are. In the reality of it is fan clubs dwarf us on Facebook. Facebook doesn't have to concern itself really with Canada, except that they operate in Canada. But people personally agree to the terms of Facebook. And I mean, I think this whole thing is misguided, really. But that's neither here nor there at this point in time. Anyway, back to the article. Finding someone guilty of obstructing Parliament is a rare move in Canada. A study from the Library of Parliament found that while allegations of contemptuous behavior are made frequently, findings of contempt are unusual. Also, while the House of Commons has a range of penalties to punish contempt, quote, finding of contempt is often considered sufficient in itself. Notes the library. You've been found in contempt, sir. Oh, no. Yep. All right. What happens now? Nothing. Okay. Have a good day. All right. You keep doing that Facebook thing. Okay. Symbolic messaging. Back to the article. Even if it's only symbolic, even if it's only a symbolic finding, it could send a message, says NDP MP and Committee Vice Chair Charlie Angus. Quote, if they believe that Canadian lawmakers are so inconsequential that it is a contempt of Parliament, said Angus, you have a company that acts with complete disregard for the democratic systems that we've put in place. To me, that's just unbelievable that a company could be that dismissive, and I think they have to be held accountable. Liberal MP Michael Picard, another committee member, said it would show you how seriously Canada takes the issue. Quote, we are not hunting companies. We are demanding as much collaboration as possible, he said. We need those companies to work more with us. And I scroll down. The rest of the world is starting to think about this as well. I'm not sure if there's been a time in history when so few companies were really responsible for so much of the activity that we do every single day, from shopping to banking to searching for information to communicating with others, she said. Besides Canadian MPs, the Grand Committees is made up of politicians from the United Kingdom, Argentina, Belgium, Brazil, France, Ireland, Latvia, Singapore, Ecuador, Mexico, Morocco, Trinidad and Tobago. Facebook, Twitter, Google, Microsoft, Amazon, and Apple are all slotted to appear, but so far the witness list just says to be determined. This week's meetings come days after Ottawa laid out its digital charter, a list of principles to guide an overhaul of Canada's laws governing the internet and digital privacy. However, Gould said no legislation is coming until after the next election. I think we've run out of runway with regards to legislating before the House rises in June, she said. Thank goodness. That's the good news. That's a long walk for good news, but that's the good news. There's not a chance for them before the House is dismissed before the election, and the election is going to be called in late August, early September. So they won't be sitting again to pass any legislation. So this digital charter is going to die if the Liberals don't get back in. And I don't know if Mr. Scheer has mentioned anything about maintaining the digital charter or agreeing with Trudeau. He seems to agree with a lot that Trudeau does, which is strange, but true. And so I would be concerned if a Conservative Party got in, that they would continue to try and fix the digital charter instead of abolish it. I would want it abolished completely and fully. Free speech needs to be held above all of these bipartisan. We need to have safe speech trash because it's garbage. If you want safe speech, go back to kindergarten. That's where safe speech lives. Okay. And if you want to be a part of the adult conversation, well, join in, right? But you don't get to join in and say, oh, don't talk about that. Don't talk about that either. That's not safe. Somebody might get offended. Yeah, well, deal with it. Anyway, thanks for watching, everybody. Have a wonderful day. Check out the peoplespartyofcanada.ca because uncomfortable conversations of note, conversations that move the needle, conversations that actually matter will offend somebody, will offend multiple people. And so you have to get through that to deal with it. And you have to get through that to get to the meat of the problem. And then In order to solve the problem, you have to understand the meat of it and then make a plan and move forward. And at this point in time, it looks like our government is putting paper bags on their head and running around and calling witnesses and not doing anything that's actually within their power and blaming everybody else for things that are totally out of the government's power. It's really, really interesting. Anyway, I did my goodbyes. Thanks for watching, everybody. Have a wonderful day.